Welcome back to Star Narratives, the podcast. This is your go-to for accessible and relatable astrology designed to help you understand your inner workings and spiritual awakening. I'm your host, Natha Perkins. Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm Natha. We are in full-on Leo season, and this is our Leo month. Last week, we talked about that transition between Cancer and Leo. This week, we are going into everybody's favorite episode, the shadow episode. We're going to look at the Leo shadow. But before we get started, a reminder that all of season 5 is astrological teachings, but they are psychological, spiritual, and designed to totally make you self-reflect so that you understand yourself better. And there's something about this Leo archetype that is so potent and important for all of us to get because it is ruled by the sun. And we see the sun in the sky every single day. And if it's not there, we're moaning about it. And if it's too strong, we're complaining about it, right? So you look at the planets in the sky and the ones that are the most obvious, the ones that you see the most often, that are the easiest to see, and that is the sun and the moon. Those two are the most personal to each of us. Understanding the Cancerian and Leo archetypes is really potent because we're all trying to figure out who we are, what we want, what our needs are, how we're supposed to be dealing with a world that is changing really significantly, really quickly before our eyes, and we have to change right along with it. Remember that we totally work on an algorithm these days. So anybody that is watching this on YouTube, make sure to like, subscribe, leave a comment. And if you are listening to this on the podcast, then just subscribe to the podcast. It's a way for you to give back and help more people find this information. If you like my style and you want to work with me privately, you can book a private one-on-one astrology reading. I also offer many different options for just deepening into your own astrology, or if you are a healer or a counselor, therapist, guide, coach of some sort, and you would like to be able to read a little bit of your client's astrology because it's like having a map. I did life coaching for many years before I moved into astrology, and I always felt like we just had to start at zero. With astrology, you start off with the map. You get the notes. So it's really easy to get in and figure out, this is the problem. Here's all of this information about how to work with that problem and all the remedies. You can find me at electraastrology.com, and let's get started. So like I said, it's really important to understand the Leo archetype. You do not have to have a sun in Leo, but know that we all have a sun, and our sun is the king of our kingdom. We're working with this energy all the time. Part of why I think these shadow episodes are so popular is that there's always a bit of a cringe factor, I think, for each of us. And what I'm always doing is asking you to self-inquire. I'm asking you to look at yourself and say, do I do that? Or, ooh, I do that. How could I either problem solve or take better care of myself? And so as you're listening to this episode, know that you might bump up against some hard edges because this is stuff that we are all dealing with all the time. When we're looking at ideas around identity, we just build this whole identity around how we want to be perceived. And that is the rising sign. That's the Aries archetype. We look around and we say, oh my God, in order to be safe, loved, respected, desired, liked, fit in, I have to get people to perceive me this way. And so we look at our rising sign and we say, that's how I learned as a small child to show up in my family and in my school and with my peers and now with my bosses, etc. But we know that the rising sign is not totally who we are. It's how we are perceived. It's the identity that we build so that we are safe. But the sun is the identity that revolves more around who we truly are. And it can be really hard to get to who we truly are because of everything that we build up in an attempt to get people to see us in safe ways. So when we're looking at identity, we're often having to dismantle that personality, that ego self that says, in order to be safe, I need to be aesthetically beautiful. I need to have a certain amount of money. I need to have a certain level of education. I need to live in a beautiful home. A lot of our identity, although it is part of us and it feels very real, a lot of it is not actually that important to who we are or that relevant when we get down into it. Does it really matter whether you have straight hair or curly hair? Is the sports team that you love, that you are their biggest fan, is that really who you are in your heart? So we start looking at these questions of the heart when it comes to Leo. And we have to begin to separate all of that ego identity that says this is who I have taken myself to be up until this point, so that we can really get into who we are. Although you may be identified with your beautiful car or your expensive shoes or the school that you went to, those are very much a part of who you are. But when you go into your heart, none of that matters. What you find there is that you are sensitive, compassionate, loving, and you worry about the people that you love, and your family is what is the most important to you. So we get into the much deeper levels when we're talking about Leo. But in order to get there, it's really important that you begin to identify the structures that you've built to protect those softer, more sensitive parts of who you truly are. And that's when we get into the Leo shadow. So we begin just by looking at the ego. And we know that the ego is an organizing principle. It helps you to get oriented in where you are in life. I live in Boulder, Colorado. I have kids. I love spring and summer. Those are some of my ego identities. We all have them. But the ego is also that part of us that is always desiring more, wanting to be perceived in a certain way, wanting to solve problems in a certain way, wanting, wondering, worrying. That's what our ego does. Anytime that you find yourself in a place of wanting more, wanting something else, wondering about the future, wondering what's going to happen, wondering what happened, or worrying, fretting, scanning your environment for issues and problems, that is a sure indication that your ego has entered the building. And your ego always has a desire, supposedly to optimize, to make things better. But usually the ego comes in with an agenda, and it's not the healthiest agenda. It's usually fairly dysfunctional because it sounds a lot like if you were better, if you had more, if this problem didn't exist, then you could be happy. And when we look at the Leo archetype, we know that this is an archetype of joy, of happiness, of excitement, of creativity. It's like all of these really juicy things that we want that are ultimately connected to our heart. And our heart tells us the truth. We're going to talk more about the heart next week, but our heart is where we find the truth. And our ego is where we find the false version of our truth. It's sort of like when you watch a commercial and it presents you with this really saccharine version of life. And you're like, wait a minute, nobody talks like that. Nobody wants that. That is what I am being told that I want. That's what I'm being told is desirable. And so your ego functions in the same way. So just take a breath for a minute. Do a scan of your body right now. And what are you noticing? Are there any emotions that are pinging around? And when you tune into your heart, what does it feel like in there? So there's something about being able to come back to the breath and come back into the present moment that is a way to detach from the ego. So the ego teases us. So the ego can lie to us. And you'll see this out and about, the people that are very arrogant. So arrogance is a Leo shadow. And it's where we do this game where we overestimate our own importance. And we look down on others because they don't have the things that we consider to be valuable. And there's some way, and we've all done this, right? And that's part of why this episode is cringy and uncomfortable, because we're all going to see these parts of ourselves that, like, oh, I have looked down on other people who didn't have as much as me. I have managed to become more successful in this area than you, which means that I am better than you. But again, this doesn't take into account any part about the heart. As you know, you could have the most wealth in the world and just be a really empty person that's not cool, that's not loving and not compassionate, that's just very vain and vacuous. And you could have absolutely nothing and be the most heart-centered, giving, gracious person. We've been sold this idea somehow that people that are younger, have more money, have more education, have more success, live in fancier neighborhoods, whatever it is, we've been sold this idea that they're somehow better than others. And it's easy for our egos to get into that and believe that. And that's when we become arrogant. And another way that this kind of shows up is in attention seeking. And we see this a lot on social media. And I think that we just know that there are parts of us that are attention seeking in different ways. So what happens is that when we are feeling deficient and when our ego is feeling like, wait a minute, I'm looking around and other people seem to have more than me, and it's making me feel something about myself, then we might move into the attention seeking mode, which is where we feel like we have to flaunt. Like, oh, maybe I'll put on a low cut top so that my cleavage gets attention. Or maybe I'll get a fancy car so that when I'm driving around, then I will be seen as more successful. Maybe I'll use some big words. Maybe I'll do some name dropping. We're trying to build our ego up so that we once again feel like, okay, I'm okay. And that's part of the work that we do with the sun is we look around and we say, am I okay? And if we are misunderstanding our okayness and we're saying, I'm okay as long as the people around me are reflecting back to me what I want, that is a false sense of okayness, because what we really want is to feel solid and secure within ourselves. We want to be surrounded by the things that we love. We want to be acting out of love. And that requires heart-centeredness. One thing that you may notice about a lot of people that are in the public eye, whether it's a politician or a celebrity or somebody on social media, an influencer, or even somebody that's quote unquote popular in your circle, is that you might notice that there is a bit of a deficit in terms of their being able to be heart connected. It's all of this vacuous blah, blah, blah. Look how pretty I am. Look how rich I am. Look how successful I am. Look what I'm making for dinner. Look how much I'm solving the world's problems. And yet there's like no heart connection. And you can feel that from people when they are not connected to their own heart. And it's all just mental, or it's all this ego striving, trying to get that reflection from other people. And that's hard energy to be around if you are a heart-centered person. So take a minute and just tune into your own heart, because I'm assuming if you're listening to this podcast that you want to be heart-centered, right? It is really the biggest piece of being embodied is not forgetting that you have this soul, this higher self, this connection to the divine. And that is what you access when you are in your heart. It's also where you access love. And love is the most powerful thing that we as humans, it's the most powerful tool that we have. So I mentioned vanity, and vanity we see all over the place. I mean, vanity is something that is so in vogue right now. All of the wanting to be beautiful, needing to do all of this alteration to your body, to your face, to your hair, in order to be perceived as beautiful, all of the slinky clothes, the sexual appeal that is everywhere. So this is also the ego needing validation from things that are actually quite empty. The desire to keep boosting your beauty as your biggest asset is something that as one ages, you begin to realize, oh, this is going away. This is not something that's going to hold. And that's where the idea of pride has to come in, because the more that you are identifying, wow, I am trying to get external validation from people. I have these assets, whether it's beauty, youth, money, education, connectedness with big name people. I have these assets and I feel very prideful about them. I feel like I'm very special and important because of them. And so these are also qualities to watch for in yourself, because essentially all of this, the arrogance, the self-centeredness, the vanity, the pride, the attention seeking, all of those point to being out of touch with your heart, because it's the ego scrambling around trying to get the supplies that it needs in order to feel valid and valuable. And we all want to be seen. That's part of what we talked about last week, is the son representing that father, the good father. We just want to be seen. We just want to be loved. We wanted the attention. We wanted to have fun and laugh. And we wanted that energy to help us figure out who we are. And if we didn't have that growing up, then you're entering into the world and you're trying to get reflection of who you are. It reminds me of that book, Are You My Mother? And if you remember, it's a little duckling, and the duckling keeps walking around asking a chair, a tree, a cow, are you my mother? Because wanting to understand, like, how, like, who am I? Where did I come from? What is important about me? What is my heart centeredness? Where does that come from? Well, a lot of us learned that that comes from out there. And we have to do all of this song and dance, all this performance and this striving in order to be seen, in order to be valuable. So when you find yourself acting out these Leo shadows, it's a good indication that you have lost touch with your heart temporarily and that you are not seeing yourself clearly. I can promise you that the people that love you, the people that are worth your time and attention, don't really care whether you have wrinkles on your skin, you drive a fancy car, you are friends with the popular people, because they aren't in love with those aspects of you. They're in love with your heart. And so that's part of this Leo exploration, is saying, what am I in love with myself for? All of this striving, this falseness, this drama, this attention seeking. It's all in an attempt to dominate people's perception of me. But why do I need to dominate somebody's perception of me? Why can't I allow them to love me no matter what, with the understanding that not everybody is going to love you? When I was a jewelry designer and metalsmith, I took a class from a lovely man, can't remember his name, but he said when he would be at jewelry shows, people would walk by and they would have commentary about his jewelry. And sometimes he would see people that would give his jewelry sort of a strange look, and he would say, well, it's not for everyone. And that really stuck with me, because you are not going to be for everyone. We're in a culture right now with all of the social media and just with everything being in such a fishbowl that it's almost like we're trying to appeal to strangers. We want strangers to think we're sexy and desirable. We want strangers to think we are successful and moneyed. We want strangers to somehow see us as better than them. And when you think about that, why? Why does it matter what strangers think about you? What matters is the people that you love, the people in your circle, your colleagues, your clients. What matters is what they think about you. And if they are loving you because you're sexy and you have big boobs and your skin isn't sagging and you make a lot of money, where does that leave you? How deep can that relationship be? How loving and satiating will that relationship be? Not very. So in Leo season, this is where we begin to question that ego and say, well, what is it that I'm really looking for? And the answer to that is going to be found in your heart, because your heart is the part of you that is going to be informing you about what to move toward. In a few weeks, we're going to talk about the Leo gifts, and we're going to go into joy and creativity and the juiciness, the richness of life, which is in a completely different side of the spectrum than money and status. Money and status are empty if you're all alone and nobody loves you. Family, loved ones, good friendship, creative endeavors, joy, peace, and juiciness can be found without any money and without any status. Some food for thought. So just take a deep breath and tune back into your heart for a minute. And you might want to take some notes about this information, because the challenge for you this week from me is in really watching that egoic part of you that is trying to get reflection from people because of what you have, what you look like, what kind of education or social status you have. And just remembering that there's a lot of emptiness back behind that. There's not a lot of richness. And if you want to move towards the richness, which, the sun, it's like, think of the sun in the sky. It's such a potent, beautiful orb of light and fire. It feels good on our skin. It gives us light. It keeps us alive. And so what is keeping you alive right now in terms of really taking you into your heart and taking you into your capacity for joy and for being with the true, delicious richness of being a human? Does that feel the same as all of the efforting and the striving and the trying to get strangers to see you in a certain way? All right, let's talk about the astrology of the week. All right, mostly what I want to talk about astrologically this week doesn't even begin until August 4th, which is Sunday. So we have the new moon in the sign of Leo at 12 degrees. The sun and the moon are always right next to each other in the same sign, in the same degree at a new moon. And these are periods where we're meant to introspect. We're meant to get quiet and go within. In this case, we are identifying, we are examining that Leo energy within ourselves. Are we seeing ourselves? Do we love ourselves? Are we connected to our heart? And if we use the analogy of the king and the queen, sun and the moon, the king and the queen are together in their quarters. They are making connections, making decisions. They are re-engaging with one another. This is also your internal mother and father energy. So the part of you that is more masculine in nature, the part of you that is more feminine in nature, heading the household. This is also the sun, which is your strong sense of self, and the moon, which is your vulnerable emotional landscape. So the sun and the moon, like we've been talking about for the last few weeks, are just very integral parts of you. So you can always use the new moon energy to tune in and get some clarity about how these differing parts of you are interacting. In this case, we're looking at it through the lens of Leo, which asks the questions I've been asking you for the past few weeks. Am I operating from my heart? Am I doing things that I love? Am I seeing myself clearly? Am I tuning into my creative impulses? Am I honoring myself? And these are potent questions to ask yourself. I also noticed that this moon is at 12 degrees of Leo, which is a pretty interesting degree in that when we had in 2021, Saturn and Uranus squared each other 3 times, although they were never at 12 degrees, they were at 11 and 13 of fixed signs. There was something about Leo, and there's something I believe about this energy that's going to bring you back to 2021. There's going to be some sort of question, and it might be as simple as, who have I become since 2021? And am I operating from a place of love? Because when we talk about Leo and Aquarius, when we'll do that 1 week in this Leo season, we're going to talk about Aquarius as being connected to the collective. The collective is just very loud in all of our experiences. It didn't used to be when we didn't have things like social media and we weren't in that fishbowl, like I mentioned, but now that everybody seems to be connected with everybody all around the world, and everyone seems to be in everybody's business, and everyone is concerned with everyone's opinions and stances. It's very tricky out there to be a unique, authentic version of yourself if, like we just talked about, you really care a lot about what other people think. So there's something here with this new moon where you are being asked to just get more clarity about whether you are making your decisions and living your life because of what other people want you to do and how other people see you and perceive you and either accept you or reject you. Like I said earlier, the people that are only going to love and respect you for the way that you look or your sexiness or your aligning with the right political party or being on the right side of some social justice issue, those people probably aren't ever going to really love you for who you are. So this is your opportunity not to ensure that everybody else loves you or desires you or sees you as valuable and valid, but to make sure that you are seeing yourself as those things, regardless of what you have and who sees you and how many followers you have, etc. So there's some big messages here. We also have Venus at the 29th degree. So Venus is our values. Venus is finishing up the Leo lessons. We've just been talking about the Leo lessons. And Venus will very quickly in the next few hours move into the sign of Virgo. And that is very quickly followed by Mercury going retrograde in the sign of Virgo. So Mercury is slowing down. We're going to feel that all week. The mind is going to be asking you to relax a little bit and take some breaks. Mercury in Virgo is very much about wanting to get the answers right and can sometimes see things through a black and white perspective. So that's another thing that's really important as we're moving through the next several months of the astrology. And also, there are so many elections happening around the world, and there's just a lot of collective unrest. Is that you want to be careful not to get so high on your personal soapbox that you are unable to see the value in simply being a part of a collective. If you look at things like astrology or human design or the Enneagram, you know that everybody has a different perspective. Everybody has different gifts and skills. And then we look at things like religion and location and race. We're all so different, and yet we have developed this cultural agreement that we're all supposed to think the same thing and have the same outlook and the same opinions. And if we don't, we are meant to be outraged that somebody is different than us. So be really careful, bust yourself if you notice that you're going down that path. Mercury in Virgo wants to tie everything up into a neat bow and have it very organized and look at the world through a black and white perspective, but that doesn't serve anybody. So as Mercury is going to retrograde back into Leo during this retrograde, again, this is you coming back in to remember that you are unique. You have your own ways of working the world, of being in your life. And you don't have to homogenize, and you don't want to expect everybody else to homogenize as well. All right, I'm going to leave you with that. This is a quickie. I hope that you have a great week, and I will see you next week. Thanks so much for spending time with me. You can find me all over the internet or at electroastrology.com. If you enjoyed this podcast, share it with your friends and help them discover us. And if you are the kind of person who likes to leave reviews, I'd greatly appreciate it.